One of the first jokes I learned as a new programmer was about HTML not being a programming language. The joke follows a group of people talking about some sort of project, and a random person blurts out, "I know HTML." It's assumed everyone in this group knows HTML, so saying it outright is met with a groan by everyone else. It is true though, HTML is not a programming language. The letters in the acronym stand for Hypertext Markup Language. The word markup describes the purpose of the language. HTML is meant for layout and illustrative purposes only, and doesn't support the capabilities required by a programming language. Occasionally, I get the opportunity to meet someone who is just getting their start programming. From here, the conversation moves to what language they are using. You never know what it is that got them hooked. But occasionally someone looks you right in the eye and says, HTML. Oh no, the poor soul has no idea and now I have to tell them. At least that's how I used to feel about it. These days, I drop right into the conversation about what they are learning and how it's going. Why can't developers start by learning HTML? We all have to start somewhere, and beginning where you find interest doesn't hurt. What is programming other than writing instructions a computer can understand? Writing loops or markup, the computer still needs to be able to interpret what you have written. I myself started heavily working with HTML before I got a foothold writing code. If someone sticks with HTML long enough, they'll figure out to really make the most of it, they'll need to add some more skills to their repertoire. HTML is a lot of fun, and it's super simple to get started. Even the most basic text editor can be used, and no matter how much you screw up, the browser will try to make it work. It's like training wheels where it keeps you from hurting yourself. Just look around the web at all the cool templates and page designs. There's so much inspiration to draw from to try and test the limits of your knowledge. These days, it really burns me to hear someone get shot down when they're excited about learning HTML. Working as a web developer for years, you expect others in the field to be intimately knowledgeable of HTML. In fact, when teams I've been on had a resume come in and HTML was missing, we always questioned if the candidate knew it. In those cases, the first question was, do you know HTML? We didn't doubt that they did know it, but we had to make sure. And there even was a case where no, they didn't, which was honestly super weird since they were interviewing as a front-end developer. So much of the developer education space is focused on telling you what language you should learn. What drives me crazy is where articles go on listing the hottest languages of the past year, like it was some sort of stock trade. The thing is, while there has been the occasional spike in interest for a language, they stay roughly the same. Shifts do happen, but these shifts are slow. Java has comfortably sat in the top 5 for a long time, and honestly, I don't imagine it going anywhere for quite some time. Looking at the top languages historically, you'll see a trend where languages used to power the web hog most of the 10 top spots. One thing they all have in common, though, is their relationship to HTML. Many applications are abandoning the pattern of downloading a program to a user machine, and instead hosting the app in the cloud. These cloud applications then rely on HTML to create the interface users interact with. So why can't HTML be an introduction to programming? I think it's mostly because the community has decided so. At least, maybe some of the more prolific developers, or even just as a joke, that have stuck around. I think that's a problem for the dev community, where HTML is looked down on. It's not alone though. While JavaScript has been an up-and-coming language for some time, it's not uncommon for individuals to put down the language as well, both as a joke and in earnest. I don't know. Maybe it's just a case of, I don't like your thing and you don't like mine, but we don't like this thing. Interestingly enough, in the modern web application landscape, preprocessors have popped up for CSS. CSS, being farther from programming than HTML, can now be generated programmatically. CSS preprocessors support functions, variables, and loops. It's slightly humorous that CSS has come so much closer to programming than HTML due to these preprocessors. The programmatic behaviors of these CSS preprocessors aren't supported by CSS natively, but are written using a different language which compiles into CSS. At the same time, any CSS that is valid is still considered valid CSS. So, food for thought. I love coding, and it's been my hobby and career for years now. I'm excited every day I power up my work laptop, and every evening when I sit down for my own projects. There are dozens of unfinished projects scattered amongst the folder structures of my machines. In older machines, I must have lost or abandoned at least another dozen or so projects. Some of these projects are pure HTML. Learning to code has been a labor of love, and I don't plan on stopping. It all started with a little bit of HTML. It's where I first found my interest and gave me a jumping point to different technologies. I wouldn't think of shooting down an aspiring developer for making their own way in the field. Coding should be fun. It should be a challenge. And as far as learning goes, it should not be a chore. I'll encourage anyone to study any language. Where they choose to go from there is up to them. Finding enjoyment is the most important part. If it's not enjoyable, it's not worth doing. Whether it is Python, JavaScript, or HTML, whatever gets the gears spinning is the right place to start. What makes sense? What connects the dots? There's some really abstract stuff out there which can be hard to digest. There isn't any reason why we can't start taking smaller bites with something more forgiving. This, I think, is why there's a benefit to using HTML as an intro into programming. I'm glad you took the time to listen to my opinion. Everyone is entitled to their own, but it doesn't necessarily mean they are correct. I'm personally looking through the lens of my past experience.